All right, hand printing your relief blocks. The nice part about relief is that it is a method that we can print from home, particularly since we now have access to water-based relief inks and things like that are pretty inexpensive, and all it takes is a little bit of elbow grease. So what I have already done is I've created a jig for my plate, and I have mapped out where my paper goes on that jig as well. So I've got the L-shaped line that I know that lines up with the edge of my paper. So I'm taping down the jig so it doesn't shift around. I've got newsprint underneath of here so I don't get anything on my table or surface. I'm double checking that my paper lines up with the L-shaped line that I've made so that I'm not having to redo this while my block has ink on it. So if all that checks out, then next I need to roll out my ink. So you can see that I say that your slab should look like the skin of a peach. So there's a few things here that I'm looking for. I'm looking for that kind of velvety peach skin look while I'm rolling out ink. And I'm also listening for just a mild hiss when I start rolling. If it sounds like this wet slapping, you have way too much ink on your slab, and so you should pull some out of it. So first off, I've squeezed out some ink from my ink tube. This is a water-based ink, and then I am pulling out a line that is the same size as my roller. So your ink slab should be as big as your roller is wide in each direction. You can see that there was too much ink there. I pulled a little bit out. So I need to even this out. Should look like the skin of a peach, and then I can start rolling up my image. I am barely applying any sort of pressure here. It's gonna strip off quite a bit of ink on your first time rolling this up because there's no ink base there, and the block just tends to absorb more at the start. So I keep going back to the slab when I can tell that it's just stripped off most of my ink from my roller, and then roll over the image. I'm rolling from multiple directions to make sure that I get this whole thing inked up fully. I can add ink back into the slab if the slab stops having that velvet appearance, as you see I just did right here. So I added like a little line, even out the slab again, and then continue to roll until this whole thing, my whole block has that same velvety appearance over the surface of the plate. If you're pushing too hard on your roller, you're gonna fill in any of your really tiny lines. So you need to be kind of careful for that. If you have too much ink on your roller, it'll do the same thing. So it's important to keep that nice, even level of ink on that. So I'm gonna proof on newsprint first. So you can use anything that is kind of smooth and flat. A wooden spoon works fantastic. A large metal spoon would work. You can see I had like a rounded edged metal or wooden block. Everything has kind of a curve to it though. You don't want to use any really sharp edge stuff. You want something smooth and round. And you're putting down a bunch of pressure, and you're applying pressure evenly to the whole image. And then we get our first proof. And so it should print up pretty nice, even and black just from the pressure you put down by hand. So in between every print, you will always re-ink the image, as I'm doing here again. Going back to the slab, rolling up. As soon as I lose that velvety peach skin appearance to the slab, then I will add more ink to it. You typically have to do this after every few rolls, because every time your block is sucking up some additional ink. You can see once again, still rolling from several different directions to make sure that I'm inking up this fully. You can see I'm looking at different angles to make sure I have that velvety look on the plate as well. If you see patchiness or where it looks like it's kind of gray, then you need to keep rolling it. I'm getting these pieces of painter's tape ready, getting a little bit of cotton fibers in them before I get started so it doesn't rip my paper. I line up my paper with that L-shaped line that I drew on my jig, hold that in place, and then I'm gonna put the tape on just a little bit of the paper, on the paper edge, so that I have it hinged so that I can flip it back as I need to. And then a piece of newsprint, and then I'm burnishing once again over the surface of this block. I have it hinged so that I can pull it back and look, and I can always lay it back down if I need to apply more pressure. You can see because of the Eastern paper that I'm using that I can tell areas that have soaked up ink, and I can tell which areas are maybe still a little bit light. So I'm hitting those areas multiple times. If something looks light, I go back over it and burnish it a little bit. And I can do some final little touches on the back side of the paper itself. And then I pull that back to ensure that I have a nice even print. I want to look for anything that maybe looks like a little bit papery, is the way we describe it, where more paper is coming through than ink. And then I would just re-ink the block and run through my entire edition of however many prints I had planned. So now this is going to be the cleanup section of things. So this is all water-based inks. Here, it would be a different cleanup for oil-based inks. I can't really put this ink back in this container, so I am going to try to save it in a piece of saran wrap or cellophane. So I scrape up as much as I can, lay the cellophane flat, and then roll the ink within that, and then I can always poke a hole in this later and squeeze the ink back out for use. This is just to maximize however much ink you have, so that you don't run out or so that you're not being wasteful. And I kind of tie that off to keep the moisture inside. My roller, my palette knife, my plexi here, all just gets cleaned up with like some soapy water. So I roll the roller through the ink and the water, and then I kind of scrub that off, and I do that until there's very little residue left. It might stain your roller a little bit, this black ink, but you shouldn't have to worry about it. If you don't have a piece of plexi at home, you could use a piece of glass, you could use a plate, anything that for rolling out your ink, anything that you have like a smooth flat surface that's easy to clean afterwards will do. Like an old cookie sheet would work, something like that. So I'm stripping off the extra ink before I put my block away. And then you can see the difference between my newsprint proof and my final print. And they look pretty consistent across the board, and so that's what I'm looking for. I'm kind of pointing out some papery bits of some of this where maybe I needed more ink and maybe I needed longer bits of pressure. So always be paying attention to the consistency of your print and make sure that everything is printing consistent and even all the way through.